Chuck, I want to raise the question of the latitude or the discretion that's afforded to local authorities when it comes to making decisions about the allocation of social housing and the purchase of housing under the tenant in situ scheme. So Dennis Murphy and his family were offered a home before Christmas by South Dublin County Council and then were assessed and their income was over. Why? Because Mrs Murphy had worked as asked, as called upon by the Irish State, over and above the call of duty during the COVID crisis as a carer. And the discretion that is afforded to the local authority is to overlook that and to allocate them the home. But they decided not to do it and refused them the home. Not only that, they took them from the housing list. It's cruel, it's harsh, it's unnecessary. And the other aspect of discretion afforded to local authority officials, and they're decent people, I'm not here to bait them up, but there is a problem that we don't have oversight on that. And I have written many times to Malcolm Noonan about this, who is the Minister in charge. Local authority officials are often not using discretion to buy back properties under the tenant in situ scheme because, for example, it's a 3-bedroomed house where 2 people might benefit from. Or indeed, they have reduced the cost that they would pay to the landlord by 20% below the market value, and the landlord can't afford to absorb that. There are many incidents of this, and these are ordinary Ballyfermot landlords, and I'm sure there's lots of them around the country. We're being accused of never sticking up for them. I'm sticking up for both now, both the landlord and the tenants who are in situ, and in the case of Dennis Murphy and of his family, the absolute cruelty of the lack of latitude and discretion shown by the local authority. But where do we go? Because the department comes back and says, we don't interfere with decisions of the local authority. So going to a minister is no good to us, and it's certainly no good to the people whose lives are really blighted by this.
I just want to thank deputies for the questions. We'll do the best to answer them as best I can, but some of them are quite detailed and technical, and will probably be best answered by the Minister for Housing or Minister O'Donnell. But if I don't answer them, I'll make sure a more detailed response is provided to deputies in writing. Deputy Durkin asked about the service sites in towns and villages, and I'll definitely follow up on that, because we did, or at least have approved in principle, the scheme to service sites in our towns and villages that people could then use to build a home. And there's lots of advantages in that, not least people being able to get their first home or get a new home for their family, but also it reduces the pressure for one-off rural housing, which is a benefit too. But I get the sense, talking to councillors around the country, that that's just not happening in practice. And I need to work out why that is, and we'll talk to Minister Bryan about that, certainly. In terms of being asked earlier to act as Taoiseach on housing, I am very much acting as Taoiseach on housing. When I first entered government, we were building 7,000 houses a year. When I first became Taoiseach, it's 14,000. Now it's 30,000. I know it's not enough, but in my time in office, we've quadrupled the number of new homes being built and doubled just since I became Taoiseach the first time, and we're going to do a lot more. Take social housing, for example. We've often been unfairly criticised as a government for over-reliance on the private market. We see the biggest expansion in social housing in the last couple of years than has been the case since the 1970s. And one of the most interesting aspects of the census figures that came out only a few weeks ago was that not just the raw numbers, the percentage of people living in social housing has gone up in the past 10 years, not down, which totally demolishes the claims of the left with regard to this government's approach to social housing. The numbers of families in social housing, up in raw numbers, up about 40,000, I think. The percentage of people in social housing, up in the past 10 years, not down. And we need to increase that further because the amount of social and public housing, in my view, should be closer to 20%. No, it doesn't include HAP, Deputy. That's the whole point. It doesn't. And that's why your arguments have been so false in the past couple of years in relation to this government's approach to social housing and the party I lead's approach to social housing. Tens of thousands of more people in social housing than 10 years ago, and in percentage terms an increase as well. And I think that's significant and ought to be acknowledged more frequently, and people who make those false claims should be taken on by journalists and presenters and informed commentators, etc. And we're seeing a real increase in the number of first-time buyers buying their first home. Again, nowhere near enough, but 700 mortgages being approved every week, 400 or 500 individuals and young couples buying their first homes, and great to see that. And it hasn't happened by accident. It's happened because government policies that increase supply, like waiving development levies, which the opposition opposed, Help to Buy, which helps people get a deposit, which the opposition wants to take away, First Home, which bridges the gap between the mortgage that you can get and the home you want to buy, all things that the opposition want to take away. And I'm absolutely certain that if there's a change of government within months, or certainly within a year or two, we would see the supply of new housing go down, and we'd see the number of first-time buyers go down considerably, because you would take away all the things that are helping people at the moment, like Help to Buy, like First Home, and also the measures that encourage builders to build more. And it is the consequence, in my view, if there was a change government, is that the good things about Ireland will go bad, and the bad things about Ireland would become worse. In relation to the issue of MICA, I spoke about this earlier in the Chamber. Adding to that, I just want to say that the Act was commenced back in late June, and regulations have been signed. The enhanced scheme is now open to new applicants. It provides an evidence-based system for additional counties and parts of counties to be designated as required following a technical assessment by the Housing Agency. The enhanced and current schemes are not compensation or redress schemes. They are remediation schemes of last resort, put in place by government in order to voluntarily assist homeowners to remediate damage caused by the use of defective concrete blocks. Engagement is ongoing with the Banking and Payments Federation on specific issues raised by homeowners to see what can be done to respond to their concerns. Existing applications to the current scheme will benefit retrospectively from the new enhancements being brought under the new scheme. And the legislation provides for transitional arrangements from the current to enhanced grant scheme. Homeowners will also be able to apply for ancillary grants for alternative accommodation and storage in accordance with the legislation. There's been a constructive series of meetings with Donegal County Council over the past number of weeks. Updated rebuilding costs for 2023 for both Donegal and Mayo were received at the end of February, and these updated costs relate to 8 house types and provide for an increase of 13 to 15% since the first report back in 2022. The reports for Clare and Limerick were received on the 18th of April and are currently being considered. The expert group also made recommendations to the Minister to operationalise the SCCI report to address all options to be included in the regulations. To answer the Deputy's question, the scheme provides for 100% grants, subject to an overall maximum grant of €420,000 per dwelling, which we think is fair. Grant rates are in keeping with advice from the SCSI. A government guarantee in the form of a second grant option is required for a period of 40 years. A revised application process, which removes the financial barrier to scheme entry. There's an independent appeals process. Alternative accommodation storage costs are allowed up to a maximum value of €25,000, including immediate repair. The expertise of the Housing Agency is being used in assessing applications. There's the inclusion of the RTB register of rental properties and the inclusion of Clare and Limerick in the enhanced scheme upon commencement and option for other counties to enter the scheme, which I mentioned earlier. Exempt development status for like-for-like remediation works is also completed under the scheme. In terms of the question on specific targets for affordable housing schemes per county, which was raised by Deputy Dillon, I'll have to come back to him on that. I do think there should be affordable housing schemes in every county, but do need to bear in mind that the cost of housing varies considerably from county to county, and there are indeed some counties where it's more expensive to build a new home than it is to purchase an existing one, and that needs to be borne in mind in anything that we do. In relation to the Housing Adaptation Grant and the DPG, Minister O'Donnell has done some work on this. We acknowledge that the cost of home adaptations has gone up considerably, and we have to recognise that, and that there is a lot of demand for the scheme. We want to make sure it's properly funded because housing adaptations enable people to stay in their homes for longer and to be discharged from hospitals quicker. So it's not just a benefit for them, there's a wider social benefit too. And Mr. O'Donnell has a paper developed on that, which we'll consider soon. Just in relation to the issues raised by Deputy O'Callaghan, first of all, I want to congratulate him on his appointment as Deputy Leader of the party, a very important role, and congratulate you on that. And we will give consideration to your suggestions in relation to young people leaving care, and do acknowledge that young people leaving care can't just be abandoned and set off on their way at the age of 18, given their background, given their experience in life. They need a plan and ongoing help, and if we don't provide that for them, the costs are much greater.
I think we'll have to